Hey guys, welcome to another video. My name is Ian. Welcome back to the channel Ian the Reader. Today we have a very exciting video for you all. I'm joined by Jake and Stacey, who are awesome. And if you don't know already, they chose some books for me to read. This is round 2 of Jake and Stacey choose books for me to read, and I have results for you all. So very exciting. Much like the thriller and horror genre, this competition has been full of twists. One of those twists is that there ended up being a tie after I read the original 6 books. 3 of the ones that were selected by Jake and 3 from Stacey. There was a tie on the score, so I had to ask for an additional book. So I have 8 books to talk with you guys about today. It was quite a journey. So, yeah, Jake, how you feeling?
I was very confident about the 3 books that I originally chose, but then when you said that there needed to be a tiebreaker, I went through like 3 or 4 different books of like what I could choose, and I just decided, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna throw a Hail Mary pass and you're either gonna love it or hate it. And
We'll
I'm just
see.
nervous. I'm nervous.
We'll see. We will see. Yeah. So, like I said, there were a couple twists. The first of those was that I had to ask for an additional book. Another one is that, unfortunately, I had to ask Stacey for another book from the original 3. Funny story, if you didn't hear in my wrap-up video, but I accidentally spoiled myself on one of Stacey's picks for me. So, Defending Jacob has now been replaced by What Have You Done by Sherry Lapina. So, yes, very excited about that. Just to recap, the 3 books that Jake chose for me to read originally were Mr. Splitfoot by Samantha Hunt, You by Caroline Kepnes, and The Last Word by Taylor Adams. And the 3 books that Stacey chose for me to read were Escape by Ian Rob Wright, Confessions by Kane Minato, and now What Have You Done by Sherry Lapina. Additionally, like I said, they each had to submit another book for me to read. Jake chose Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey, and Stacey chose The Whisper Man by Alex North. So I've completed all 8 of them, all 8 books. What we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth between each of you, leading up to the final books that you had to submit. So you already know that the first 3 books from each of you will result in a tie. Don't know the scores, but we'll do that. And then how I'm going to do it is I'm going to tell you both. So just to I'm going to go ahead and tell you now, your final books were very close. It
Ooh,
was
okay.
it was insane. Honestly, if it wasn't for the competition, I might have given them the exact same rating.
Ooh.
But because I didn't want, obviously, I couldn't ask for another book from you guys. So I had to be very critical, and ultimately, there's a 0.25 star difference. It was a very close race, but we will see who the winner is. So we're gonna go ahead and start off with Stacey's, and go to Jake's, and yada yada yada. But at the end, I will tell you my thoughts on both of your final books, and then I will tell you which one of you is the winner, and then I'll tell you the scores. So
Okay.
cool. All right. So starting off. First, actually, hold on. I want to know, what do you think was my favorite book, Stacey, and what do you think was my least favorite book from you?
I think that your least favorite book for me is going to be Escape, only because it has a busy ending. And I know that that can sometimes be polarizing with you.
Okay.
And also, it's not necessarily a more serious type of thriller. It's more like a fun, cheesy one. So I feel like that will be the lowest rated for me.
Okay.
But the highest rated, is it going to be Confessions or What Have You Done? I think Confessions, just because it's something different. Like, it's a unique storytelling style. It's not something you've read before, really.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. All right. So we'll go ahead and start with the first book from you that I read. That was Escape
Okay.
by Ian Rob Wright. So this is my second book by this author. I had originally read Dark Ride, and you guys had both told me that you'd read Dark Ride and Escape, and you both liked Escape more, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't get that.
No, no.
Because I liked Dark Ride quite a bit more personally.
Okay.
I really I enjoyed certain aspects of Escape. I thought it was fun. Like, it's just kind of like a casual, like, kind of campy, sort of like horror novel. It's about a group of coworkers who get stuck in an escape room and it turns deadly. Um, my thing was, I think I just kind of, you're right, the ending was a bit busy. And I think the whole time I was kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop in some ways. I was like, okay,
Okay.
so we have kind of like this basic setup of the situation. It kind of reminded me in some ways of like the Saw franchise,
Okay.
in some ways.
Yep.
And then like I kept waiting. I was like, there has to be more to this. And there eventually was, but when it happened first, it kind of came a little bit too late for me. Like it kind
Okay.
of all happened very, very suddenly at the end. And I was like, okay, that kind of seems sudden. And then additionally, it felt like really out of nowhere almost. Like I
Okay.
didn't quite get all of the steps that got us to this is what's going on here. I still had a lot of fun with it, but I don't think that there were a whole lot of moments that like blew me away from this one. So it was very much like a kind of like middle of the road kind of
Okay.
experience for me. So not bad. I'll still read more from this author. I think also I was hopeful that I would like it more. Maybe my expectations were a little bit high because I
Right.
really liked Dark Ride quite a bit. I thought it's another one that's very campy, but kind of like a fun, creative, like that's like a haunted theme park type thing, which I just find super engaging. And the escape room was like a fun idea, but I think the execution was just kind of a mixed bag because on one hand, I was not surprised by a lot of it, but then the surprise at the end was one where I was just like, that doesn't really make sense to me. So,
Okay. That's
yeah.
fair.
But still a really good recommendation. I definitely get why you picked it for me, and I had a lot of fun with it. I would recommend it to people. I just personally, I think my expectations were a little bit off of what I got. So
Yeah, that's fair. That might be an author where like the first one you read is the better experience too.
I can definitely see that. Yeah, because yeah, I could definitely see that. I really could. Actually, that's a good point. So I will go ahead and tell you now though. Escape was my least favorite from you. So you were
Okay.
right. So Escape, I gave 3 stars.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Jake. Before I get into yours, what do you think was my least favorite from you and my favorite from you?
I have no clue, but if I just throw out a wild guess, I have a really good feeling about Mr. Splitfoot, so I'll say that that was potentially your favorite, and then maybe your least favorite. Maybe the last word. Maybe it got a little too crazy for you, but I don't know. I could be dead wrong. I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Cool. 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 All right. So the first one from you that I read was Mr. Splitfoot. And this one was interesting because you recommended to me to go into it blind because that's what you did. And I can see why that might have worked for you, but that in some ways was hindering to me. So this is definitely like a very slow paced, kind of like character driven, not really plot heavy story. And I'm not going to get too much into the details just in case the people who are watching this want to go in blind. But it has kind of a back and forth in time type of situation with similar characters. You get one who's young at a certain time, and then a different character who's young at a different time. And I think that mixed with the fact that I didn't really know what the story was about or where it was going, the first half of the book was a little bit of a struggle for me because I struggled to kind of get a grasp of like, okay, we have two different timelines here, what's going on with this character, what's going on with this character, how are they connected. I think for me personally, going in blind made me just like a little bit too confused for the first half. Now I will say the second half was very strong. I liked the ending of this book a lot. I liked the climax of this book. I liked the overall tone of this book quite a bit, and I think the writing was great as well. It was one that I think I should have physically read. I listened to it on audio and I kind of wish that I'd physically read it. And so it's interesting because this one, beyond the other ones, kind of feels less to do with the book itself and more to do with me. Like, I think perhaps if I'd read this under different circumstances or at a different time, or if I knew what was going on, I might have given it a higher rating. But the first half of the book, like I said, I was just like, what's going on? Who is this? Why do I care? What's happening?
Yeah.
And so overall, my experience was diminished slightly. But still, I recognize its quality. I think it was pretty good, and I like the ending, like I said. So I give Mr. Splitfoot a 3.5. So
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
that makes sense. I guess for me, I kind of like going into books not knowing a whole lot, and then like you said, you were a bit confused. I kind of like that. Like you go into a story and then try to figure out what exactly is going on. I think that's fun, but I get
Mhm.
it.
I think
I'm like you, Ian, where if I don't have the context or the basic context up front, I notice the details less because I'm too busy trying to figure out the context, and then I enjoy it less because I don't catch the foreshadowing stuff.
yeah,
So I
and I
can
think
see.
I
Yeah.
I I can be both. I think for books that are more plot heavy, I like to know as little as possible. Like if I go in blind to a plot heavy book, I love the surprises. I love just kind of the pace of it. For like more slow paced, theme based books that are not so much about the plot, I feel like context is almost essential for me because I can then kind of understand why the characters are doing what they're doing and how they relate to each other, and everything just means more to me kind of having the context. Now, I can see why, Jake, you would say that you enjoy that more because, like I said, in other instances, I'm all about that. But I think for this book in particular and this type of story, it just didn't work for me in that way. Okay, next up, Stacey. Then I read Confessions by I don't know if I'm saying it right. Kane Minato. That's
It
how I'm
might be.
saying.
Can I? I'm
Kanai.
not sure. I think I've looked it up before, but I don't remember.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I'm known for saying names wrong, so it's all good. But this was really interesting. When we first talked about this book, you mentioned to me that there was a moment that made you gasp, and I absolutely get it because that moment made me gasp as well. It This book is so different and very very interesting. The way that it's told, I liked a lot the way that it's told from different perspectives each chapter. It made me, especially because knowing that going in, that was kind of an interesting thing because I kept thinking to myself, okay, who are the next people going to be? Who are we going to get the perspectives of? I really really enjoyed that, and there were definitely some really big shocking moments here. My one big issue with this book is it's weird because the whole chapter thing, how it's told from different perspectives, and there's a certain, especially with the first chapter, there's a certain level of like anonymity that comes into like what characters are being talked about. I struggled a little bit with the character work in this book.
Okay.
Um, the plot was great. The execution of the narrative choice, I guess, was really interesting. I found myself, even like the things that I was supposed to maybe feel a little bit emotional about, because some of the characters go through some pretty tough stuff in this book. I didn't latch onto the characters enough to like really like feel it, you know. Now I'm not necessarily sure that that was the author's intent. Like maybe, it's not about the emotions as much. It's more just about the plot and things. But I
I
will
think it's
also.
cool.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I
No,
think
please.
it's cultural differences too, because Eastern culture is less focused on the individual and how they're feeling. They're more focused on the collective, right? And it's
Yeah.
Japanese author, so
That actually did occur to me as well, because that's one thing that people have said a lot about, like, the three body problem.
okay.
How, like, that's very much, like, idea focused rather than, like, character focused. I typically am very much of a character story reader, so I think that does just come down to personal preference. This is a book that I would not bat an eye at somebody giving 5 stars. Like,
Yeah.
it makes sense to me. If you read thrillers, if you read stuff that's a little bit more experimental in the thriller genre, this is right up your alley, and this is one that amongst the books that you guys chose for me, I am most likely to recommend to other people to read. So
Okay.
great job with that. I also will say the ending is pretty memorable. I won't obviously say what happened, but particularly the last like 3 minutes, something happens that was very interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah, overall, I like this book. I thought it was really engaging, really interesting. I got through it very quickly, but the lack of connection to the characters just isn't my personal taste. So overall, I give this book a 4 star. It was a good read. It was a good read. I liked it.
Awesome.
Jake. So then I read The Last Word by Taylor Adams, and this was probably my least favorite book of the competition. So
Ooh.
yeah, this is one that I can see going either way for some people. The weird thing is, it almost felt like I was reading two different stories. The first half of the book is kind of one way, and then the second half of the book is kind of another way, even though it's like a very straight line narrative. I won't get too much into the details of this book, but essentially, we have an author who writes books, and somebody leaves a bad review on them, and that author gets a little bit crazy, and it's like a reverse misery, where the author tries to go after the reader rather than the reader going after the writer. And my issue primarily boiled down to the author character. I just found him to be utterly ridiculous. like like as I was reading him, I was like, how am I supposed to take this guy at all seriously? Like he's a self-proclaimed what are they called? Incel. That's what he is. He calls himself like an incel or like a sigma male or something. I don't even know. I can't remember. But he kind of talks about himself in certain ways and has certain ideas. And then like he's got like a freaking katana that he just like starts swinging around. And I think he's described as having like a greasy neck beard and just there were so many like the author really went for it with this antagonist, and I was just like, what is this Scooby Doo crap? What is happening right now? So like the first half of the book, the whole time I was just like, this is kind of dumb. That's how I felt about it. Now I will say this book was one of the ones I messaged you guys and said there each of you have a book that rose or fell a star based on the last like 20%. Jake, this was yours. It raised a whole star because I really liked the ending. I did like the ending. I liked some of the reveals, particularly like the last like 10 to 15%. I was like, okay, now I get why people would give this 5 stars. Because I did like the way the author chose to do it. And at the same time, I also recognize it almost justifies the first half. Like it almost does, but not quite. Still, there's some fun times, and there's definitely a lot of like craziness that goes on in the first half. Like I was bewildered, which if that's what we call craziness, then yes. But overall, it just was not my favorite, and I found myself just not at all like. I was just like, what is this? So amusing in a way that it perhaps wasn't intended to be. But overall, I ended up giving it a 3 star. Like I said, it went up a whole star because it was at a 2, and I was very
Oh
worried
boy.
for you. Yeah, because you'd had a 3.5 and then a 2. I was like, this is not good. But yeah. So what do you think of that?
That's completely fair. I had a fantastic time with it. It was just completely bonkers, and yeah, I definitely get the Scooby Doo thing, but yeah, I just thought it was great the whole way through. It was so much fun. But yeah, I get it. I get it.
Okay. Yeah. Stacey, have you read that one?
No, but my sister has, and she's over here reacting as you're talking.
Lisa, what do you think? What do you think?
When you said, "Oh, it's my least favorite," I'm saying to Stacey, "What?"
Yeah. Yeah, the first half, that guy was just such a bozo.
It was the humor. It added to the book, you know?
Maybe it's
made me
just not what
laugh
I
so much.
expected. Yeah, because like, I mean, like, I don't know. I guess I just expected him to be more menacing, but I was just like, this guy is such a dweeb. Like,
I also,
Yeah,
I also thought
that
you
was
would.
what made me laugh.
I also thought you would appreciate because there's a lot of just commentary on like reviewing books and stuff. So I thought you would
I
relate to that
I
too.
did like that. I did. Like I completely get why you chose it for me. It was really silly the first half, and I think I don't typically go for silly when it comes to my thriller horror books. So,
That's fair. That's fair.
but I get why you guys like it. So good for you guys. I'm happy for you. Yeah. So overall I gave this one a 3 star. So final book. And at this point, Stacy has a 4 and a 3,
3.5.
and Jake
But no,
has
this-
a 3 and a 3.5. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. So that means you each have a 4 and a 3.5 star left at this point. So Stacy, your 3.5 is "What Have You Done" by
Okay.
Sherry Lapina. This one is the one that I was talking about for you that rose or fell by a whole star in the last 20%, and for this one it fell a star in the
Okay.
last 20%. So
I think I get
really,
why. I just didn't
perhaps
have
you
the same
do.
problem.
Yeah. So I really liked this book for like the first 70 to 75%. I was very happy, like because like I said, you had originally chosen Defending Jacob for me. I got spoiled on it, and I jumped into this one after that. And Defending Jacob was exactly like you said, like a slow paced mystery and such, and I'm sure that I would have ended up enjoying it, but because I only got about 20% in before I got spoiled, I wasn't like super hooked by it yet. I was like, okay, I'm excited to see where this goes, but then I got spoiled, so I was just like, okay. But this one is immediately interesting. Like, it wastes absolutely no time. I really enjoyed the way that this was written and the way it's executed. Like, we have a lot of different perspectives going on in this one, and it felt like almost like a short movie or something like that, where it's like every POV was like very intentional. A lot of the POVs chapters were like very short. It was just like, you need to know this, you need to know this, you need to know this, and it just was rolling. And I really loved that. The pace was excellent for this book. Even like up to the end when I had issues with it, the pace was excellent. So very good there. And the mystery was also really compelling. So we have a character who is murdered. Her body is found in the woods, and there's just mystery of like, okay, who did this. So it's pretty like a basic setup, but what I thought was really interesting about the story was the way that the characters kind of interacted with each other, and how a lot of them like knew stuff, but in some ways they like didn't want to tell because they like were worried about like how it'd be perceived, or like they actually didn't think that like the person who they had information about was the murderer. So they were like, I don't want to say this because it's like kind of relevant, but at the same time it's, I don't want to put them in a bad situation. So I found that kind of a really interesting story, just because the character dynamics and the way they interacted with each other was kind of a different approach than what I'm used to in a thriller. So I really liked that. I also really liked the way that there were just like so many questions of like, who could have done this? There were like 4 or 5 different people like throughout the whole story where I was just like, it could definitely be this person. And I will say, I think I expected a little bit more out of who it was and why they did it. And that's ultimately what it came down to. I was like, this is a great mystery. This is a great thriller. Things are going well. There's going to be like a big twist. And I had my own theories inside my head of like who did it and why. And then the reveal happened, and I was like, that's it? Really?
You had a better headcanon
I
theory.
did. I was like, that's not what I would have done. So
Yeah.
yeah. So that was one thing where I was just like, when the reveal happened, I was just like, okay, this is the person that did it, and this is why. Okay. And then like also the kind of like final confrontation or climax of that was a little bit underwhelming as well. I was like, let's have a little bit more danger here. Let's have a little bit more like, oh my gosh, something's gonna happen. But instead it's like the police are on their way, and then they show up and nothing happens, you know?
Yeah.
So those things. And then additionally, there is a certain narrative choice where one specific POV is added
Okay.
that was very interesting, and I was like, "Where's
Yeah.
this going? Why is this here?" And then the author didn't really do anything with it, and so I was just like, "Okay." I wanted more from that too. So this is one where the pace was excellent, the setup was great, the mystery was fantastic, and then when I got to the conclusion, I just felt like underwhelmed. So I can see other people not feeling that way, and like I said, the story was on track to be excellent. It crossed my mind at one point, like, is this going to be a 5-star?
Yeah.
But
I
then
gave it a 5, and I
yeah,
just didn't, because I was so entertained.
yeah, it's very entertaining. I will say that like it ultimately just came down to like I had certain expectations based on the setup, and I'd never read a Sherry Lapina book before either. So like it was solely based on like her work in the first 3/4 of this book. I was that impressed. I was like, she's gonna do it. She's gonna stick the landing, and then she did.
Yeah.
So
It'll be fun to see when you get around to reading some of her other ones that Jake and I both have highly rated, because this one Jake didn't love so much, but I did. But we have some mutual favorites where we've both given her like 4.75, 4.55. So it'll be fun to see you read one of those and see.
Well, yeah, I will say I'm grateful that you picked this one, because I have been wanting to try her books for a long time. I just haven't. And I do still feel very excited about reading more of her books, because like I said, it was fantastic for the first 3/4 for me. It was just that last bit. So I could see myself really loving some of her other books for sure.
Yeah.
I pretty much have the same complaints you do about the book.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting.
Like that,
Yeah. So overall,
the
okay.
narrative book you're talking about, yeah, I thought it was interesting, but then you get to the end, you're just like, really? Like that's what is happening? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
See, I had a bit of a different experience because I actually predicted the killer. And so I was like looking for all the foreshadowing through it.
Yeah. Overall, I definitely understand both of your experiences with this book. For me personally, I was a little let down by the ending, so I ended up giving it a 3.5. So,
Okay.
yeah, like I said, it dropped a whole star. It was almost a 5 for a second, and then I got more reasonable. I was like, I think it's going to be a 4.5, which would have secured you the win, but the ending It was very close. So 3.5. So we are now down to Jake's final original book, which was You by Caroline Kepnes. And this is one that I've wanted to read for a very long time. And so I was very eager to read it. And I had quite a good time with it. I'll say that. So this was my 4-star read for you, Jake. And this is one that I actually also early on I thought might be a 5-star because it's just so original. Like perhaps it's been done now, but I also recognize like this book came out like 10 years ago. And it's so interesting. So we follow like a stalker and it's from his perspective and it's just all about his fixation with this woman. And it is very intense, like for that reason, just because you get like Joe's thoughts 24/7 on this woman, and it's disturbing and it's unhinged, and the lengths that he goes to stalk this woman are just like absolutely wild. I had three main complaints that ultimately made me go down to 5 stars. One, some of the stuff that he talks about with like the stuff that he sees when he's stalking this woman, I'm like, surely she closed a window. Like, like, come on. There's no way you saw all this. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me how he just sees so much from where he's at. So that was like a little bit like, but I set that aside. So that was one thing. Another thing was the ending. I felt like the actual final climax confrontation type thing was just a little bit underwhelming as well. I thought there'd be a little bit more to it, but it just kind of happens, then wraps up really quickly, and then it's like, oh, okay, all right, so we're done. And the third thing is this: Joe does some like pretty awful stuff throughout this book, the whole time. Like even like low scale, like low criminal activity bad, and then like high criminal activity bad stuff. And there were like no moments of like repercussion or like he never seemed to be like worried about like cops or anything. And I was just over here like, surely he should be concerned about being caught doing some of these things. And he was, like, in regard to like certain specific people finding out, but not an overall like the cops are after me type thing, which if it was me, that would be like my number one concern, which perhaps it kind of speaks to his like mindset of like all he thinks about is this person, all he thinks about is what they think. But for me personally, I was just like, nobody's calling the cops right now. like what's happening? Definitely is a book that requires you to suspend your belief a little bit, or disbelief,
Yeah.
however you say that. And I could do that to a certain extent, but not without it costing the book a little bit. I still enjoyed it. Like, I won't say that those things kept me from enjoying it a lot, because I did have a really good time with it. I guess, like, it's really disturbing at times. But overall, I had to take a little bit of points off. So overall, I gave it 4 stars.
So I had a question. How do you feel about just Joe as a character?
I mean, I don't like him, but I enjoy reading his perspective.
Did
Like,
you at any point find yourself rooting for Joe?
uh, he had good taste in books. Not like rooting for him, but it was a very confusing experience because I was a little bit mad when I found out a certain thing that his interest person is doing to him later on in the book. But I was like, should I be upset about this? Because clearly he's not in the right here. So it is an interesting dynamic to be in with a protagonist where like you're in their head, they have goals that they're working towards the whole book, very focused and very driven towards those goals. And like, there's the reader part of you that wants to like see them succeed in their goals. And then there's the human part of you that's like, this is a monster.
Yeah.
So very interesting. So yeah, that's a good question.
I also wonder, because you said you kind of like your thrillers, I don't know, to be like a bit more serious, and this has a bit of black comedy to it. I think it's a kind of a black comedy, but
Yeah.
how do you feel about that?
I don't mind black comedy. Silly in thrillers, like, it has to totally make sense to me. Like, this is something where the humor's there, but it the whole time there's still that context of like what Joe is doing and who he is and his motivations and what he's working towards. But it is kind of like absurd, like the things he gets mad about or that like really set him off, and it's just like, you're an idiot. Like, what are you doing? It's he's weirdly amusing, but also really disturbing. So yeah,
Okay.
I think that's my issue, is the antagonist of of The Last Word was more weird than he was disturbing. Joe is more disturbing than he is amusing, and so it all kind of works out. So
Okay.
Yeah. So what this whole discussion is teaching me is that you care a lot more about characters, and I need to be more thoughtful about characters when I pick books for you, because I'm
I
more of a plot pacing reader.
but plot is big for me too, because like what have you done? That was very plot heavy, and I really
Yeah.
dug that. So it depends. It's all about execution, and I think just balance between the two. So
Yeah.
We'll get it right eventually, Ian.
well, maybe.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
All right, here we are. We have arrived at the final two books. Your ringers, your tiebreakers. So, like I
Yes.
said, you guys chose Just Like Home, uh, for me, from Jake, from Sarah Gailey, and then The Whisper Man by Alex North from Stacey. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys my thoughts, and then I will reveal the scores and who the winner is. So, we'll go ahead and start with the one I read first. So that was Just Like Home. So yeah, this was a bold pick. This was a very bold pick, Jake, because the one I was a little bit alarmed when I saw the Goodreads average. It's like a 3.3 or something. So I was very surprised when you ended up picking this. I knew it was your favorite book of the year so far. And I knew that the author herself has quite a bit of buzz for her book, The Echo Wife. I've heard really good things about that one. Not good. Okay, cool.
I gave it 2 stars.
Oh,
No,
yikes.
it's an interesting story, but the logic for me is what ruined it.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, I went into this book unsure of like how it was gonna go. It's weird because like on one hand I had low expectations because of the average, but on the other hand I had high expectations because it was your favorite book of the year. So I really could have seen it going either way, and ultimately I ended up really enjoying this book a lot. Yeah, so great job. It was a risky pick, but it was a good one. Whether or not you won, we'll get into that in a minute. But I enjoyed it. Take pride in that at the very least. So yeah, I thought this book was excellent. I really loved the atmosphere, like the whole vibe of the house. We have a main character who comes home because her mother is ill and dying, and there's this house that her father built that her mother's been living in. She's been estranged from her mom, and she has to kind of like get her affairs in order, her mom's affairs in order. That's why she's there. But yeah, the whole vibe of the house was so eerie, and I really loved just like the tension that is built throughout this book. It was really well done. We get kind of like a multi-timeline situation where we find out about her growing up. There's something that happened in her past involving her father that I won't get into, but it's kind of the basis for everything that happened and where she finds herself now. And I loved the execution of all the past stuff. I really particularly enjoyed her relationship with her father. So, a little bit of a spoiler for my thoughts on Stacey's book. I am a sucker for like paternal relationships in stories. Like, I'm a dad, so it makes sense. But books where like there's some interesting dynamic to a father-son relationship or a father-daughter relationship just works for me. It really does. So I really thought that. What was that?
Except for Firestarter.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't believe that they're actually related. So. Yeah.
Maybe you just
So
don't love it when King writes it.
maybe I don't actually. That could be it
Oh,
because
boy.
anyway, we won't get into that. But yeah, so I overall was really pleased by her relationship with her dad. I thought it was very complex. And also, I really loved the way that the mother's relationship was impacted by the relationship between the father and daughter. It was very dysfunctional, very complicated, and at moments, like I just understood like the emotion behind it, even if the things they were saying to each other were terrible. Like I could see the jealousy, the envy, the desire for acceptance, all these things going on from both sides. And I loved it. And the characters do some like really messed up stuff throughout the story, but there's still kind of like that family bond that like challenges the way that they react to people doing terrible things, which I thought was really good. This book does take some risks with the conclusion that really liked. I was on board for that. So I wasn't sure if the author was going to go for it, but she did. and it was weird, but I liked it quite a bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is one that I get the rating, the 3.3, I guess, because I think the book has to either work for you or it doesn't, but it did work for me. So your Hail Mary was a good call. I can't remember what your other book that you were thinking about giving me was, but this one was one of my favorite books of the competition. So it was great. Good job. I'm not going to tell you your score, not yet. So, any thoughts on all that though?
I think it's well, before we get into like book specific thoughts, I was gonna say I think it's fun that in the tiebreaker round, Jake and I went completely into our own realm of taste. Like this is a book that everyone would say is not a Stacey book, and the book that I picked is one that Jake DNF'd. So we really went like, whose taste are you gonna align with more?
It was close. It was close. So it's hard to say. So yeah. Any thoughts on my thoughts, Jake?
I'm glad my Hail Mary pass worked. I was very because it's a book that, like you said, like you're either gonna love this book or you're not gonna get it, and that's why the rating is so low. And I tend to like, I guess, polarizing horror books, and I'm just super pumped that you liked it. Even if I didn't win, just that's a win for me knowing
That's
that
a win
you
for
liked
you.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, Stacey, your book was The Whisper Man by Alex North, and this is another one that I really, really liked in the end. Like I said, your guys' scores are very close, and if it wasn't a competition, I might have rated them the same. So this one is interesting because I think this one took me a little bit longer to get invested in, but it pulled on my heartstrings in a way that the other one didn't in the same way. So both of them have very complicated family relationships at the heart of them. This one just kind of sucker punched me a little bit in the second half. So there's this story is about a serial killer, basically, I think like 20 years ago, committed a series of murders of children. They're arrested, and it seems like this has gone away, but now somebody is doing the same thing again, and they're wondering if it's a copycat killer, and things go from there. But in addition to that, there's also a really deep like family story here of a man and his son who have lost the woman in their life that meant the most to them, the man's wife and the mother of the child. And additionally, there's also some other family dynamic stuff that comes into play later in the book, that I didn't see coming. And also there's just a lot of this is really a story about family trauma, and multi-generational impacts on that trauma and complicated family relationships. And so it's one that, while it took me a little bit longer to get my bearings on, just because there's a little bit more going on in this story. Like the Sarah Gailey one is very focused. It's just about this woman returning home. It's very much focused on that one kind of 3-person family. With this, there's a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different characters. But yeah, I really enjoyed the family dynamics and the emotional beats, and the conclusion of this book as well. I'll say the last, like the epilogue, really was a very memorable epilogue, and some of the reveals as well throughout were not necessarily like shocking. Like I didn't gasp or anything, but like I was very engaged with a lot of the reveals that took place. And this book is just really eerie as well. There's some like imagery that is used and some descriptive moments that were just very creepy. So this one definitely worked for like the Halloween vibe. Both of these, actually, the last ones had some really creepy imagery that worked really well for me. This is not my first Alex North book. I've also read The Shadows.
I haven't.
I didn't really like that one. So
Oh,
I was a
okay.
little bit nervous coming into this one because I was like, The Shadows was not a big hit for me. And so I was like, well, I knew The Whisper Man was more popular. So I was like, maybe I'll end up enjoying it more. And I definitely did.
Good.
So yeah, this one was a really good pick for me as well. And it's so interesting for me that both of these books really represent your taste, because these were my favorite books of the competition. I liked both of these books more than your other 3 choices for me, which is so
Funny.
weird because they were not your first choices.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to tell you, but that's how it all panned out. So
I think part of why it didn't come to mind when it was one of my first choices was because I read it so long ago that I didn't really remember a lot about it.
mhm,
So
that's
I'm
fair.
like, is this really gonna have like all these layers that Ian likes or these
It
things?
did, yeah.
Yeah. I took a risk when I had to pick a tiebreaker because I'm like, I think it does. I know it has some things that you will like, but yeah, I couldn't remember because it'd been so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it worked. It worked. Yeah, the family stuff is really what pulled it together for me. The thrills and the mystery were good. The family dynamics are what really sold me on this book, though. So it worked. It's very my taste, I will say. So yeah. Okay. Here we are. The final reveal. So one of you got a 4.25 and one of you got a 4.5.
Okay.
So it literally came down to 0.25.
Oh man.
Crazy. Yeah. And on another day, I might have given both a 4.5, but there has to be a winner. We can't do 2 more books. So the winner of round 2 of the Jake and Stacey TBR contest is, come on, the book is drummer. Come on, what are you doing? The winner is Jake.
Ooh,
Yes.
okay.
Jake won with a 4.5 for Just Like Home. It was so close. It was so, like, I was going back and forth, and like it ultimately wasn't, like, again, like it was so close. The deciding factor was that I wasn't really invested in the Whisper Man until about the 25% mark.
Yeah,
That
that's
was the
fair.
big difference. For Just
I
Like
think
Home, I was immediately invested and like on board with it. The ending might have been a little bit more emotional for me for the Whisper Man, but I had to look at the whole experience when I was thinking about the rating.
yeah. I think I had a similar experience where I wasn't drawn in immediately too.
Yeah. I just kind of like, there's a lot of different backstory going on. Like you have to think about like the past crime that sets the foundation for this, the trauma that's been gone through from some of these characters, where they're coming from, and I would just, there was so much going on that it took me a little bit of time. So it wasn't until I got kind of invested around the 25% point, but there's a reveal that happens involving the whole family stuff around the 50% mark, and that's when I was like locked in, like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, cool. So yeah, I'm surprised you DNF'd this one, Jake. I'm curious why you did.
Well, like you said, you read The Shadows and you didn't really jive with that one either. I DNF'd both of them. I think it's just something about his writing. I don't know. I couldn't get into either one of them for whatever reason. It's
Interesting.
been so long, I don't even really remember.
Yeah. No, I think the Whisper Man is easily better than the Shadows. But Just Like Home, like, checked off all the boxes for me. It really did. Like, I really don't have any complaints with Just Like Home. I loved the tone, I loved the setting, I loved the ending. I talked about a risk that she took. I was talking mostly about kind of like the antagonist, what's going on with the antagonist in that moment, but she also makes a very bold choice with the protagonist in the finale, and that was crazy.
Completely understand why it has such a low rating, but it's just one of the weirdest books I've read, and just everything about it worked perfectly. It's still, I mean, the year's not done yet, but it's still my favorite book of the year so far.
Yeah, it was good. I think between last competition and this competition, it is my favorite book. So
Awesome. I'm glad we are picking books that you're mostly enjoying. Like there have been none that were like completely awful.
yeah, no, I think most of these books are really good, and the ones I didn't love at least had some redeeming qualities. The Last Word somehow ended up not being a 2-star. It was a miracle. But yeah, so congratulations, Jake. You're the
Yeah,
winner of round 2, which I guess we didn't solidify this, but I would like this to mean that we have a round 3 to decide who's the ultimate winner.
sure.
Of course.
Yeah. So we've done just kind of generic random things. We've done now horror and thriller. I think a sci-fi and fantasy round is called for here, the grand finale. So you both read a lot of sci-fi fantasy. So yeah, I think for that one, I would like it if you guys could get me to them as soon as possible.
Okay.
I I think I'll probably take my time a little bit with those though, because I don't want to
Yeah.
get burnt out. So with thrillers and stuff like that, it's so easy for me to binge. But with sci-fi fantasy, I have to be in the mood for it, and so yeah. So round 3 will be coming soon. But great job, Jake. Great job, Stacey. It was so close.
It
Like
was
it could have gone to either one of you.
Yeah.
And if any of the previous books, I mean, it was close to begin with. You guys had a tie. originally, and I went back and forth on that because I was like, do I have to tie it? And I didn't feel right about adjusting any of those, so it was very good. You guys really, and it's so interesting because it wasn't like all of them were positive. You each had some that I really liked and some that I had some serious complaints about. So
Wow.
weird, really weird.
I would have been so curious when you eventually go back to defending Jacob, what would have happened if that one had stuck around.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know, because I mean, it could. I don't know. It could have gone either way. It could have gone either way. But I mean, What Have You Done was a good pick for me. Like I said, I enjoyed most of it. It's just the conclusion.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you'd pick The Couple Next Door if I would have liked it more.
Yeah, and I debated that too. I was like, oh, which one do I pick? But then I went with the one that I ultimately gave a higher rating to.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. You guys are learning more and more about my reading tastes. So hopefully this final round will be conclusive. So yes. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for this again. I've read so many books that you guys have recommended this year now. So that's 14. And we'll get another 6 in there at some point soon. So I appreciate you guys both a lot. So good job, both of you.
We love that we get to force you into some of our favorites.
I'm in. Yeah. So I found some good reads in there. And then there's Firestarter. So yeah. Alrighty. Alrighty. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Go subscribe to the Bookish Drummer and the Chapter Conundrum if you haven't already. They're great. They have mixed quality taste in books, but they both read. So
and we both need to get back to uploading on our own channels now that our like
Soon.
crazy company and vacation is over.
Yeah, hopefully things slow down for you guys very soon, especially once this readathon is settled down. So yeah, but awesome. Well, thank you all so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.